Good evening, everybody. Councillors, officers, members of the press, members of the public. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Children's Services, Education and Skills Committee, which obviously is the last one. I made a mistake last night of saying the Corporate Parenting Board is the last meeting. And to remind you, the Parenting and Partnership Board, we've got another one on the 29th of April, but this is the last scheduled meeting of this committee. So welcome to Chris and to Claire, who recently joined the committee for this meeting. Welcome to both of you. Well, rejoined in both cases, yeah. So there are no apologies because everyone is here. So item 2, the minutes of the meeting of the 15th of January. Are there any comments about the accuracy of the minutes of the 15th of January? Have a proposer for those minutes, please. Councillor Hendry, Councillor Andre seconds. All those in favour? Any against and abstentions? One abstention. So I'll just sign those minutes. Are you abstaining, Councillor Mostyn? Okay. 2 abstentions and 7 in favour. Right. Thank you. Item 3. Are there any declarations of interest members wish to make for items on the agenda this evening not already pre-declared? No? Okay. We'll move on to item 4. And I've got to thank Kat for this one because update on actions was something the council decided we should bring in. Matters arising as it used to be called. So update on actions is the new term for matters arising. And, thank Kat for pulling this together. So that is item 4 in your pack. Are there any comments regarding Debbie? Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note that minute item 49D, the information has been provided to us, but it's not showing on the agenda. I think it was the 3rd of March.
Telepathy, you're right. There's 2 items waiting information, and that information was emailed separately at 3:26 on the 3rd of February, 3rd of March. So yeah, so the only item outstanding is the previous one, 49C. I believe we're still waiting for confirmation. Section 151 officer of arrangements regarding the safety. Is that still the case?
Yes, it is. I think they've been so busy doing the work around the council budget, they've not got round to responding to that yet, but I'm sure they will.
So regarding are we stuck with 10% or not? It was 10% less what you paid in and stuff, wasn't it? And so we're no further forward on clarity on that one yet.
No, so I think this question relates to the way that the council is financing the overspend in the dedicated schools grant, which arises from the overspend in the high needs block. I think it was Councillor Jarman who asked the question, and
Chair.
So it's a question around how the council is financing that debt, whether it's financing it from cash reserves or whether it's funding it through borrowing. That's what it relates to.
So we'll get further clarity from the section 1.1 in due course. Councillor Jarman.
We did receive some follow-up clarification to this, in that the debt only has to be shown in the budget and on the Isle of Wight Council books once the debt becomes technically realised, which is only at the point when the school actually closes. So the previous advice regarding the transfer of that 10% remaining only occurs at that point when the rest of the money, the 90% is paid, or the school closes and the debt gets transferred anyway. So there's 2 points at which it can occur, but it is at the late. Either of those points has not arrived. The 10% though is not only for this year; it goes forward into future years. So it has to be built into the budget for future years. The indication being that although it's only given for 1 year at 90%. They will look favourably at doing a similar basis, I think is the word, for future years. So we do have to build that in the future.
My usual style, I forgot again. In case of an emergency, there are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or the public gallery. Exit via the door at the back of the building or across the inner car park, the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite the police station. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please do not re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a member of staff. Don't you forget something again this evening. Okay, item 5 is public questions. We have no written questions from members of the public. Do you have any verbal questions from the gallery? Sure. Okay, so you have no questions and move on to item 6. We've also had no written questions from any members of the council. So we will move on to item 7. Just before we do move on to item 7, I'll say this is the last meeting of this committee. And I just want to say a few thank yous, really. Thank you to the committee members. I think this committee has proved that although we had doubts about committee over cabinet, I think we've proved that we can, in the first year, deliver things and in most of the time in a non-political way. I think the way we've worked together this year has been a credit to all of us. I think we've delivered things non-politically, and it's all about focusing on the young people, which we've done. I want to thank our Director of Children's Services. When you work with Mr. Whitaker quite closely, you realise the enormity of the task that he's at. In 2 years he's been here now, to create a safe and stable environment, to develop a whole new directorate and still deliver things that the council wants to do. I think it's an absolute credit. And I think we're lucky to have Ashley as our Director of Children's Services, because, you know, what they've done, when you see Ofsted, which we'll touch on in a minute, acknowledge the fact that, you know, we're on this journey. Ashley has got 2 actually, service directors. When you talk to Kay about children's service, I've never seen someone talk so passionately about young people as Kay does. She really does live and breathe the care of our young people. You know, I'm sorry she's not here this evening to hear this, but, you know, she always talks about the children first and is so passionate about it. Carly's a great example, was our newest service director, of someone that the kid's been with the council for 10 years now. How the council grows talent internally is absolutely incredible. So, you know, fully deserves to be now a service director. And Beth is technically acting service director for education and inclusion. I very much hope the acting bit can be dropped as soon as possible, because what Beth has delivered in schools and the relationship rebuilt with schools and the impact she's making in schools and her total drive and passion to get this right for young people education on the island is a real credit to her as well. So I really hope that the acting bit at some point is dropped to proper, full-time, service director as well. But to the whole team, can you thank the whole team, in case we're not here after May, just thank the whole team for what they've delivered and do deliver and continue to deliver for our young people, please. Finally, I've got to thank Kat. Kat has run this committee so well over the last 12 months, nudging the chairman when he forgets to do things like fire drills and things. But, you know, taking minutes of these meetings is no mean task. So thank you all for what you've done as well over the last 12 months. That's enough of that. I think we'll move on, shall we? But no, thank you everyone. It's been an enjoyable 12 months, and we'll see where May takes us after that. So I'll move on to item 7, which is the service performance and improvement update from Ashley. And I'm sure we'll touch on the Ofsted at the same time as briefly as we can. It's still confidential. Those that were there last night would have heard the more detailed version, but obviously it's still confidential at the moment. Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to also thank all members of the committee for the work that you do every day to support babies, children, young people and families on the island. It's been great working with you all. Thank you. And also to my wonderful colleagues who are here this evening, many of whom have been at it since the early hours of today and are here still full of energy for the next few hours. Thank you very much. It's a privilege to work on the Isle of Wight and to work with such a group of dedicated professionals. So thank you. So the service performance and improvement update, the data in it relates to Q3. So it's October, November, December. And this is a quarterly update. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review the data. I know that there will be several of you who will have been through the data in great detail. The points I wanted to make briefly before we start is if we focus on children, we have about 200 children who require a child protection plan to keep them safe. We have about 260 children in the care of the local authority, and we have about 2,000 children who require an education, health and care plan in order for their needs to be met. So we continue to have high levels of need amongst the communities that we serve. A few things that have happened in the Directorate over recent weeks and months which relate. Councillor Braden's already referred to these, but it was actually on the 1st of November, so in the middle of that Q3 period, when Carly took up her new role as Service Director for Partnerships, Commissioning and Transformation. And we decided to create that additional post in recognition of a number of things. First of all, the importance of working in partnership with other organisations. They may be community groups, voluntary sector, could be health providers, could be others as well. But the importance of focusing on the fact that we can do very little on our own and we need to work with other organisations as well. The need to focus on commissioning and take a real commercial approach to commissioning and do more strategic commissioning rather than commissioning homes for children or education placements on a more piecemeal basis. And the transformation bit is in recognition of the fact we continue to be in a very significant period of change. And that if you want to deliver transformation, you can't just continue to bolt it onto people's day jobs. You have to have specific resource in order to deliver that change. And I'm really pleased with the impact that this change is already having. We're really pleased with the opportunities that have been identified working across both education, inclusion and access, which is currently being led by Beth, and also children's social care. So I believe that was absolutely the right thing to do. I wanted just to mention some of the work happening in education, inclusion and access. So last time we met, I said to you that we had brought in a project team of 4 people to work within our statutory education healthcare plan team. They have now been up and running for over 2 months. Again, we're really pleased with what they're doing. They're essentially doing 3 things. They're reviewing all our systems and processes. They are improving our statutory performance, and that is improving. Although we're not complacent, there's a considerable backlog to clear, but it's having a really positive impact on that. And I still believe what I said in January would happen, which is I believe we're by the time of the Isle of Wight Festival, our statutory performance in terms of issuing education and healthcare plans within 20 weeks will be well above national average. I still believe that is true. I'm more confident about that. And the third thing they're doing is coaching and mentoring our existing permanent workforce, who of course are the long-term future of the Isle of Wight Council. So that's been really positive. In terms of the Ofsted visit, which Councillor Brading referred to, so about 2 weeks ago, we had a call from Ofsted at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, Tuesday of half term it was actually, and they told us that they would be coming to do a focused visit on care leavers, so care experienced young people. So these, and basically the bit of the social care system they're looking at is from what happens when a child we care for when they're about 15 is being done to plan for them into adulthood. And they're looking at what we're doing to proactively manage that transition in towards 18, beyond 18, across homes, where are they going to live, vocational opportunities, what are they going to do in terms of meaningful employment, health, how are we working with health partners to make sure that their health needs are supported, whether it be dentistry or other health needs, mental health needs, because often obviously within the health system, a lot changes from being a child to being an adult. And the fourth thing is around community inclusion. So wherever they're living, what's it like for them to be growing up in that community? And so it started on Tuesday, and then a week later they arrived on the island. They were here for 2 days in the office. They met lots of young people, spoke with partners. The outcome is confidential. It'll be confidential until the letter is published, which I think is going to be on the 26th of March. I can give you a few things that they alluded to, which was that they said that they believe we knew ourselves well. So in these sorts of inspections, we always start off by saying, you know, this is what we think you will see. These are where we think we're strong. This is where we think we need to focus our improvement efforts. And I was pleased that they did say that they thought we knew ourselves well. There is learning from it, and we welcome external scrutiny, whether it be through Ofsted or others. There is learning from it, and it's probably best if we wait until a letter comes out about those areas. But I can tell you that the senior leadership team within Children's Social Care finished the action plan on Wednesday morning at their team meeting. So there is an action plan that addresses all the findings of the inspection. I received the draft letter yesterday morning, so they were able to triangulate it with that, and we're already cracking on with what they found in that inspection. And what will happen next in terms of Ofsted inspection on children's social care? We expect a full inspection of local authority children's social care in the autumn. That will be 3 years after the last one, which was in autumn 2023. And we're looking forward to that. We've got 6 months to make any final changes or tweaks we need to before we get that full inspection in the autumn. Just quickly on finances, this report only deals with the general fund finances. It doesn't talk about dedicated schools grant. What you'll see in there is that forecast for the end of this financial year is an overspend of about 2.6 million. The main areas of overspend are the same as they were in the previous report for this, and the overspends are around homes for children, not just in terms of still that high number of children, but also the complexity of their needs. The second area is around agency social workers. So although the number of agency social workers we have is continuing to reduce as we develop our own indigenous workforce, if you can refer to it as that, through the apprenticeship scheme, it is coming down, but it's still significant. So 2 years ago, we had about 32 agency social workers in children's. We've now got about 18. And it will continue to decrease as we train people who live on the island, are committed to the island long term, come through. And the third area of overspend is around our costs relating to homeschool travel for children with special education needs and disabilities. So when a child has an education healthcare plan, they then also have access to homeschool travel. And as the number of education and healthcare plans goes up, you therefore see a corresponding increase in the numbers of children accessing that. So that's all I was going to say. Happy to take any questions.
I'll just make a few points. Referring to the Ofsted, I think what was key for me was a lot of staff cancelled holidays, came in really early in the morning, changed all their plans to be part of the Ofsted, which was a credit to the team. From the debrief that we had, there was nothing that I didn't already know, which is quite encouraging that councillors knew what officers were working on. So I didn't get any shocks at that debrief meeting either. And for those that were there last night at the meeting, we had a more detailed chat on this. We're not waiting for the report. There's already been meetings and actions taken after the visit from Mark Rodwell and Ella Davis. They're already getting on and doing things rather than waiting for the report to be published. It's not like a month of standing still. They're already working on some of the actions, you know, from the Ofsted visit. So that was good to hear last night. So questions, members? Councillor Lilly.
Thank you for your introduction, Ashley. Particularly digging down to some of the figures, I've got 2 questions that link to your data that were sort of shouted out to me. Right. One is the number of children post 16. I can't see the page on the number on this.
It's small print at the bottom. Small print.
No, I'm talking about this 1E, number of children post 16.
Oh.
if you read the small print of this, it says 6 years to 13 withdrawals from post-16 education have increased, with many young people currently unavailable for work, a large proportion of whom report ill health as their primary barrier. And it also says unemployment figures for the 18 to 24 age group are high, with the number of young people recorded as unemployed has doubled for this age group. And it also the rise of young people moving from education into unemployment. So there's a rise. So my first question is about that, because that's quite alarming, right? Because and I know that there has been a national trend of unemployment, but my question is what do we plan to do about it? What effective ways can we actually help and support those young people? If you, not the figures not here, but if you look at the health figures, you've actually got a lot more young people in that age group coming into the mental health services as well within that. And I think we need then probably through the health and wellbeing board or another way to actually needs to look at that. But I'm just like your view on that, because it's quite alarming.
So there's a lot of work going on in different bits of the council relating to this. So, for example, on Monday, we had a meeting with colleagues in the Department of Work and Pensions, who have recently transferred from the DFE into there. Councillor Andre was on it, and with Rob Brindley from Adult Learning. So there's some great work going on with them about supporting these people into employment through improving their employability. But one of the things we were talking about in that meeting was it's not just about giving them technical skills, it's also about improving their confidence and self-esteem, which is one of the other benefits, I think, from people doing that. There's that goes on. We have a team called Island Futures, which sits within Beth's world, within education, inclusion and access. And they are the team that particularly focus on this group of young people who are not in employment, education or training. And Julie Lambert leads that team. They do some great work. They work, for example, with the Isle of Wight College to make sure that we are developing, and they also work with the apprenticeship team within the council. So what are we doing to develop supported internships, supported apprenticeships for all young people, including those who have special education needs and disabilities, mental health needs, or are care experienced, for example. So that's a part of do it. We also work with the regeneration team and the work that goes on there with DWP around opportunities to develop employment pathways. So I think there's a whole range of things that are being done, and I believe that they're good and growing relationships between the different bits of the council and the different bits of other organisations that are working on this. So, for example, the Youth Trust Hub up in Newport, about what's going on there, linking into the council. So there's a whole range of things. And as you said, this is a national situation in terms of what's happening with this group, this age range.
Thank you. I think it's obviously something we need to keep an eye on. My other one was under rate of children electively home educated. And it was just the fact that if you look at the national average, we're 4.4% now, that's gone up, which is, I think, where the national average in England is something like, I think it looks like sort of 1.4, yeah, within that. So 4.4 compared to 1.4 is, sorry, and this is currently at its highest level. So again, I would like to, because obviously when someone is in home educated, the money that goes with them in education is completely lost, isn't it? Right? And I think I noticed that the figure was 740. Yeah.
Sorry. If I start, and then if Beth wants to add anything. So since I've been here, the island has always had a rate of elective home education about 3 times the national average. And Councillor Jarman will be thinking, I think, that 1.4 compared with 4.4 is not exactly 3 times, because it's actually slightly more than that. So there are a number of reasons for this. And when I talk about elective home education, I think it's really important to not view that group as a homogenous group, because they're not. So we have a really proactive, excellent group within there who are choosing to electively home educate for philosophical reasons. And they're a really well organised community, and those young people are having good experiences and good outcomes, and they're really linked in. In fact, we were at Network Ride last night, weren't we? You were there too. And you know, they, for example, have an organised weekly session for the elective home education community. So really positive. We also know, though, and I know this because I have parents and carers who write to me about it on a regular basis, saying that we are currently elective home educating. It's not our first choice. We're doing it because our children have not had a good time in school, in mainstream school mainly. And that might be because their children have special education needs and disabilities which have not been identified or appropriately supported within the mainstream environment. This is what parents are writing to me and telling me. Or it could be that their children have challenges around emotional wellbeing and mental health. And that has got to a stage where they have decided that they're going to remove their children from school and electively home educate them. So it's not their first choice. They're doing it in response to the experiences of their children within the school system. And then the fourth group I would say we have within that group are families who are less engaged with education. So for example, when I joined the panel, which sits on a regular basis, which is led by our Youth Justice Service and involves the police, and we talk about children who have been arrested, for example, in previous weeks. A standard question is, what education provision is this young person receiving? And quite often, the answer is that they're electively home educated. So I would say that that's another group where there is a lack of engagement with education. And I believe that over the coming months and years, as we work with our school colleagues to improve outcomes for all children, that we will see a reduction in the numbers of those families who are choosing to electively home educate, not because it's their first choice, but because their children have not had a good experience in school. We were looking at some data actually just a couple of days ago about the numbers of children who leave particular schools to take up elective home education. And it's quite interesting to do that if you look at it by school. And you can ask the question, well, what does that say about what's happening in that school? Why is that school seeing a much higher rate of children leaving to EHE compared with that school? And as I said, I think this is linked to our wider work around overall school improvement. I don't know, Beth, if you want to add anything to that.
Thank you, Ashley. And I want to go back to the data because actually we are now forensically looking at our data in terms of the age of the children, the year group of the children, and looking at trends and patterns over the year. So looking at by half terms, when is this happening? Is there trends across our system that we can then look at earlier intervention and support for? We are hearing more from our families as to their decisions now, in terms of hearing their voice, hearing their experiences, and using that information to go back to our schools and support our schools in terms of what they're delivering to the young people. And what we're doing is working with our school leaders at the moment about those early conversations. So before the letter is handed to them saying we're going to home educate, actually having those earlier conversations with those families and those relationships that are key to support those families in their decision making. So we're looking really closely at the trends and patterns to inform what we need to do earlier on to support our families and young people within the education system.
Councillor Mosdale.
Thank you. Mine's more as this is one of my last meetings and as 9 years as a counsellor, you know, I just want a few answers to things really. So I'm looking at the increasing EHC needs, and I look back at my journey through education. And was having a conversation with my friends who actually I was at school with, the four of us, over 40 odd years ago, a bit longer than that, but I'm not going too close to it. And they were all laughing because they said there is no doubt about it. And everybody in the room here has worked for me for the last 9 years knows that this is completely correct. I definitely would have had an EHC. My concentration levels are not there. I can't stay in a meeting too long, you know, and my desire to bugger about rather than concentrate is huge, right up there. And the only reason I got a really good education is because I went to a very small village school. And then the next school that I went to, the class sizes were never above 12. And then I look at the journey that my daughters have been through school. One of them who won a scholarship to a school and was only had 10 in her class. And they only did 10 GCSEs because it was a specialist dance school, and she did exceptionally well. And then my other daughter, who was lost within what was this bulging systems where how you were funding children and education was different. So mine is at the end of my journey. How would you like to fund children and education? Where do you think classroom sizes should be? And do you think, honestly, that the larger classroom sizes and mixed curriculums are actually not helping with the level of EHCs that are requested? Because I run my own business, I've done very well in life, but actually, if I was in the education system now, 100% of my colleagues will all be going like this. I would be the child in the corridor. I would be the child that was in the school office being the very disruptive because I can't cope with too much stuff going on around me. And I definitely would have had an issue with a class of 32 if they'd shut in. I would never have got the education that I've got. Where on your wish list would you like education to go? And do you think that these class sizes and where we're going, you know, I know politically that I don't think anybody over the last, God knows how many years, either Conservatives, Labour, whatever party you belong to, have actually got the answer for the right education, how to fund it, but also with adult social care. So at the end of this journey, I'd be interested in your opinion. I know it's a long-winded, but if you get where I'm from, how would you do this funding if it was your wish? And do you agree this is not helping?
Nice long question. Four.
Shall I start again, and then Beth might want to pick it up as well? So I think that there are things that relate to how big a school is and children who have additional needs, for example. So if you look at nationally at requests for education and healthcare plans, you do see an increase nationally in year 7, for example. So when children move from primary schools, which tend to be smaller than secondary schools, you do see some children who have been able to access the curriculum and have a good experience at primary. When they go to a secondary school, that they do then find that bigger environment more challenging. So I absolutely accept that there is that. However, there are also examples of schools that are high performing schools that are big and have large class sizes where children with additional needs have their needs met very, very well. So I used to teach in a London secondary school, and I had 34 in some classes. I had nowhere near the rate of education and healthcare plans that we have on the Isle of Wight. So I think there are other things going on with this. It's not just a straight line between size of school, size of class, and how needs can be met. I think also that a lot of what you're raising here are absolutely the core of what the school's white paper is all about. So we've been talking for some time about this imminent release of the school's white paper. It came out last Monday, or was it the Monday before? Anyway, quite recently. And it's the biggest change in education policy we've seen in this country for 10 plus years. And absolutely the core of it is inclusion in mainstream schools. Because what's been happening nationally, and you can see that, yeah, it's on in number 27, isn't it? The rise in education and healthcare plans. Actually, the rise in education and healthcare plans on the island is not dissimilar to what's been going on around the country. The view is nationally that this is not in the best interest of children, but it's also not in the best interest of the public purse. And so and there's still a lot of detail to come with the white paper, but essentially some of the key themes are around how can we work as an education community with our mainstream schools to enable more children to have their needs met in mainstream school rather than having to go to a specialist provision for their needs to be met. And I believe that that's absolutely right. Of course, there will always be children and young people who need to go to a special school, go to a specialist provision. Mainstream will never work for all children. But I do believe that with the right support, with the right funding, that more children will be able to have their needs met in mainstream. And I believe that it's more about the quality of provision within that mainstream environment than it is about the size of that mainstream environment.
Councillor Jarman.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I have the privilege of going to all of our schools on the Isle of Wight, and I have to say I see some excellent examples of inclusive practice in both our larger primary schools in particular and our smaller primary schools, and that comes down to leadership and leadership decisions and our schools knowing their children really well and meeting those needs on an individual basis. And yes, there is always funding and there will always be funding, but when the school's got the culture of inclusion, that's when our young people do succeed. And I do see that on the Isle of Wight in our schools.
Apologies, Beth. Please forgive me. Councillor Jarman, I was looking at my next.
No, I picked up on the forensic analysis of the data, which is a nice term. I like it very much indeed. That's what I do in life sometimes. I think it would be very helpful if, when we're having those discussions, or when the council is having those discussions, if councillors who want to attend and join them as well can take part in that. I think we've all got a role that we can contribute to that. And I was very pleased to see the additional 4.1 million being added to the budget this year, which is in excess of the overspend from last year, which is very good. I also noted in the audit and governance meeting regarding the sign-off of the accounts and the budgets that although for the third year running, the Isle of Wight Council is only able to get a qualified version of its accounts through, the auditors refusing to give them an unqualified account sign-off, which is unfortunate and rather perplexing. That the issues that were down within this directorate were very well reported, and I think they dealt with them accordingly. The question I have, though, is related to, not surprisingly, I suppose, item or paragraph 8. And I wondered, why did we change the basis of counting that we use as regards to children? I know that it came as an explanation to figures I'd queried before, but I want to know is why have we changed the basis for counting how many children we have in education? Previously it was based on the school data, now it's based on the DFE one. I don't understand the necessity to change. I do understand that it gives us the opportunity to reflect back on them and recalculate historically, otherwise we have no basis for comparison. But it's why the change was needed in the first place.
Sorry, paragraph 8.
Yeah.
You got the page number?
18.
Oh yeah, please now, I found it. So we took the decision earlier in the autumn to move the data insights team that looked at children's services into the council's central data insights team. So if we go back to the beginning 2 years ago, what happened was all the data insights used to be done by Hampshire, and when they departed, we basically, one of the things we had to do was set up a new data insights team. So we had 2 analysts and we had some vacancies. So we had to recruit some people, and they had to be upskilled, training, etc. And we have to provide a lot of statutory reporting, in addition to using data to inform our decision making. We took the decision earlier in the autumn to move the team within Children's Services into that central council team, and we did that for a number of reasons. I'll give you an example that the Ofsted we discussed with Ofsted the other day, which I thought was a really good idea. So if we're thinking about the fact that a lot of things that relate to children's services are also influenced by other bits of the council, if we're thinking about housing and where people live, care experienced people live, we want to look at that in the same data team as the data team that's doing housing, for example. So that's an example of why we did it. Now, under that new leadership, they've made certain decisions about adjusting the data sets that we're using. And that change there is one of the changes that they've decided to do. So it sits within Emma Bruce's world now. And they've done it because they believe it will bring greater consistency to our reporting. We have to report in lots of different directions about lots of different things. And the view was that that would be a more efficient and effective way of reporting that metric. So I apologise if what it's done is it's led to some inability to compare things to how things were previously reported, but we believe in the long term it's the right thing to do.
So we were using apples, we're now using pears, and we can't compare apples with pears. Summarise that.
Well, I believe that, you know, when we're sitting here in 2 years' time, depending on how the elections go, I believe that we will then have a more robust data set that we can look at trends over time to more fully inform our decision making. So although there has been a bit of short-term dislocation, I believe it's the right decision to make for the long term.
And the figures that get put onto Power BI, will those be the school data or will that be the DFE data going forwards?
My understanding is it will feed from the same report.
It'll be the DFE data on Power BI. And will it be applied retrospectively on Power BI as well as our data informatics system that we use?
I'd have to check that with Emma Bruce about whether they're going to backdate things or whether just take a point in time and change it going forward.
Thank you.
I have a couple of comments and then 4 data things I just want to pick up. To pick up the comments earlier, you know, to elective home education is an important issue. As stated, I believe that if the standards in education in the schools is driven up, elective education should start to improve. I really believe that's a correct statement. Beth mentioned leadership just now. I don't know how many of you looked at the Ofsted report for the Lionheart when it was produced. Ofsted reports actually they're much easier to read now than they were before, but the report is really, really good. When you read it, it's a really strong report. And the art of leadership is when the head teacher phones me up and says, you're disappointed with the report. It's a really strong report. That's the leadership expectations we should be setting on the island, because there's 4 strong areas and 2 expected, right, isn't it? So 2 expected and 4 strongs, and head teachers disappointed. That's the sort of aspirational leadership the Isle of Wight needs. You know, to accept this good report, but move on. So we've got 4 bits of data that stood out to me. On page 30, it talks about secondary attendance. It's gone up from 89.7 to 90.77. But I think that's still really disappointing, because these children are going for their GCSEs. You know, the attendance in secondaries is still really, really low. Page 40. Page 40, graph on page 40 is really telling. It shows the school population on the Isle of Wight. And just look at our, we'll come to this later in the evening, but look at our it's dropping off the cliff basically, and it really highlights our population issue. But the other 2 bits of data I'm concerned about. Page 57, primary school exclusions. In Oakfield, 22.96% of exclusions stands out like a sore thumb to me. That almost 1 in 4 a suspension from schools. I just wondered, you know, what the schools doing, what the governing body are doing. That's horrendous. And also, you know, the same applies to on page 65 about Medina College, where their numbers of 64% of suspensions, 64.12 suspensions, again sticks out like a sore thumb. So those two, Oakfield and Medina, I thought were staggeringly high figures. I'm sure there's reasons behind it, but they do stand out like a sore thumb.
So under Beth's leadership, there's a lot of work going on with schools to understand what is behind those figures and to provide support to schools and young people involved in that. So it's an ongoing piece of work. And as you can see, that's done across all schools, whether they are academy schools or they are maintained schools.
Councillor Love.
Yeah, I was kind of focusing on just a small point really. So I'm looking at 44A. There isn't a page number on the details, but I was just trying to understand why in February we suddenly go from, so this is number of children subject to a child protection plan, suddenly go from 182 to 208. What's happening there in February and March? Because it's been a downward trend and then suddenly, boom. There's something there that we're missing. Yeah. It's 44A. It's just, I'm just trying to understand why. I'm kind of looking at this and thinking, is there something about winter? Because because there seems to be other elements happening in the winter. It's been a downward trend, and then suddenly, in a whole range of these, 40 starting to rise. What?
We are doing a large number of assessments and clearing the back.
That's quite a significant jump.
Thank you, Councillor Love, for your question. It is a big increase. What I would say is that it's actually less than it had been, at the beginning of the autumn. So we do see quite significant variations. Probably Councillor Jarman will tell me whether that is a significant statistical change or not. But that is the reality sometimes of what's going on within our island communities.
It's just
I can go back and speak to colleagues within our support and protection service, who are the team who support the children in need and those children on child protection plans, to see if there's anything particular there. I can't think.
That is a big jump in 1 month. If you look at all the other downward trajectory, and then suddenly boom. So I'm just wondering if there's something going on there, or I just wonder if we change the system of recording or something. But it's quite a big jump, 82 to 208, even though it's down from the original thing. But that's 20 in a month.
It was a similar jump in April last year. If you notice at the start of the graph, it jumped in April to May. It jumped, by a similar sort of number.
So I'm just wondering about what's going on in the winter months. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, sorry. So that is 24-25, isn't it? So that's just happened. It's some time ago.
But it's still part of this report, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely it is. Yeah. So let me take that as an action. I'll speak to colleagues about what was going on in February, March 2000. I mean, one thing that was going on then, that is when we started the multi-agency safeguarding hub. It went live in the middle of February. So it could be something to do with that in terms of the numbers of children that were coming through, to do with assessments, to do that. But it's some time ago. I will speak to colleagues and we can send you a written response.
I'll allow one final question if there is any. If not, we'll move on. So I see no hands. So thank you for your detailed report and fielding of questions. We'll move on to, we've got 6 papers now, 5 for decision and 1 for noting. The first 2 are hopefully non-contentious. So we'll move on to 8A, which is the school academic year term dates, 2027, 2028. Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a regular report that comes to committee, previously to cabinet, relates to the school academic year dates, and the recommendation is that committee approves the proposed calendar dates for 2027-28 as outlined in Appendix 1. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Andre, Debbie.
Thank you. It's more of a comment rather than a question. At the prompting of Councillor Brading, we actually went out to consultation again for the 2-week October half term, which has been sustained since, and I'm really pleased to see that there is still a 2-week half term in October. And the other comment to make is that I know that teachers especially really appreciate for the Christmas break that it's full weeks with weekends booking either end, and I happen to notice that that has been implemented. So I'm sure that teachers will be really pleased about that. So I'm very happy to approve that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Okay, the decision is that this committee approves a proposed calendar for term dates 2027, 2028, as outlined in Appendix 1. Councillor Andre has proposed that. Do I have a second? Councillor Jarman? All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to 8B, which is the school admissions arrangements for 2027, 2028, paper 8B. That's Ashley again, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. So this relates to school admissions arrangements. Again, it's a regular report, and the recommendation is that the committee approves the 2027-28 admissions arrangements as attached in Appendix 1 and 2.
Councillor Jarman.
Just the one, Chair. So on page 124, paragraph 8, we note the reduction of the PAN numbers in a couple of cases. I wondered, after we make those PAN adjustments, what will be the number of excess places we have on the island compared with the actual need at the moment? Not what we have now, but after we make those adjustments.
The latest data we have is the data in the subsequent report around school place planning, where we've provided the data for the total published admissions number for reception for September 26 compared with the numbers of applications. So I think the gap that's shown in that paper is the most up-to-date representation of that difference.
For admissions and for the totality of school placements, how many unfilled places will we have in total after this adjustment is made?
I don't have that data on me at the moment. Again, we can
Later. Thank you.
279 after the adjustments. Yes. Yeah. We will obviously we'll cover that when we get to paper 8D. It'll come out again, no doubt. Are there any further questions? Okay. Therefore, the recommendation is that this committee approves the 2027-2028 admission arrangements as attached in Appendix 1 and 2. I look for a proposer, please. Councillor Henry. Councillor Andre seconds. All those in favour? Yeah. Carried unanimously. And we move on to paper 8C, which is the expansion of the SEND places at Medina House. It's paper 8C. Yeah, Mr. Whittaker again.
So this paper relates to the expansion of Medina House, and the recommendation is that the committee agrees to public notices to be published relating to the expansion of Medina House School from 168 to 204 places, with 36 places being provided at a satellite provision located at the site of the former Old Barton Primary School. So Medina House School is our primary special school. We know that based on the needs of children, we need to expand the amount of primary aged special school places we have on the island. And the opportunity at the Old Barton Primary School site is there because Medina House is already located on 2 sites. We've got the main site higher up the hill, if you know where it is, and we already have a second site behind where the Old Barton Primary School was, and this is expanding essentially that site. And this increase in need is arising from the fact that if you look at the numbers of children aged between essentially 0 and 4 years that are likely to need a special school place based on their needs known at that time, it's increased a lot. So one of the changes that's happened over recent months is we've got some really good now joined up work going on around sharing information about children with our health colleagues. So some of these children, when they're born, their needs will be significant enough that it is likely that they will need a special school place. So now what's happening is through sharing information between maternity services or with health visitors, for example, at the 2-year check, that we have better visibility about which children are coming through the system between the ages of 0 and 4 who will need to go to special school places in the future. And that's another example of where we need to really work collaboratively with other organisations to understand the needs of children coming through the system. So that is relating to that. It's linked to what Councillor Mosdell was saying earlier about this increase in education and healthcare plans. And it's also relating to other conversations we've been having about special education needs and disabilities, and about the fact that even though we believe that through improving quality of mainstream education, we will be able to have more children's needs met in that environment, there will always be some children who need a special school place. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Councillor Love, Carl.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report. It's a really interesting area of work, is this SEND and special education needs. I'm a bit concerned about spreading one school spread over 3 sites. And how that affects the staff and how that all works together for a number of different reasons. One is obviously finance, but I think that I always try to think about the young person before the finance. I'm concerned that we seem to be growing one particular provision rather than creating another particular provision. And having been a governor at St George's School, I can see that their school is proposed to be replaced, but without any expansion facilities. So I'm concerned about what so point 24, you said something about how the relationship is with governors and staff, but what are the staff thinking about this? What are the governors thinking about this in detail? Is this the right way to go, or should we just not have 1 or 2 dedicated specific schools rather than trying to spread staff across all of that? I know that is this an interim measure, I'm asking, or is there some development plan moving forward? Sorry.
Beth, Ashley?
So I think you raised some very valid points. So you're absolutely right that if a school is running more than 1 site, and I have to say, I just remember, I actually said something that's not quite accurate before. So Medina School is actually on 3 sites, because we've opened another site for them for children who have social, emotional, and mental health needs at the site of the former site of Chillerton and Rookley. So this would actually
1 head teacher running all 3 schools.
Yes, it is. It's the same head teacher, same governing body, for example. But the reality is that if you look at the site of the main Medina House School site, there are restrictions around how much it can expand, and potentially one could build up. But actually, if you've been up there, a lot of the buildings are. I'm no architect, but I wouldn't imagine you can actually build up on them anyway. So we have to deal with what we've got in terms of the school estate. One of the things we are doing on an ongoing basis is looking at the wider school estate for opportunities to co-locate or to expand provision, in other buildings, and this is what we have to do. We also have conversations with the Department for Education on a regular basis about the long-term plan, about whether this, you could say, slightly piecemeal approach to expanding special provision is the right thing to do long-term, and it may well not be. But in the short term, where we're faced with a situation where we've got significant increase in the numbers of children needing special school places, we need to, play the hand that we've been dealt. Because if one was to rebuild Medina House School on a single site, we're talking about projects, years and years away, and something which from a financial perspective would be very high cost, and we would need to have support from the Department of Education to do that. So we do have those conversations. In fact, there was a delegation from the DfE who were on the island about a month ago that we met with, and they looked at a few sites about school rebuilding programme and about what the future looks like. But at the moment, we have to meet the needs of children today, and that's really what's driving it. The thing about this is it's essentially an increase of one of the existing sites already by going into a different building, which is next to the building that they are in now.
Push again, Councillor Labia.
Thank you for that explanation. So I guess one question leads to another, doesn't it? So what is the plan? Have we got a plan for the long-term future? Because at the moment it looks very piecemeal to me. And by the way, my comments are not about criticising the staff in any way, shape or form. I'm just trying to think about the management aspects for a site which now covers 3 schools with 1 head teacher. And that's a big ask for anybody, to be fair. And so that then led me to the question is, well, actually, we can't continue like this. So when is the plan, if there is a plan, to sort of resolve this, going to move forward? Because we've talked about a long-term plan. When does that kick in?
Okay, so Special Education Needs and Disabilities Transformation Plan, 6 work streams. Work stream 3 main components: occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, physiotherapy, emotional wellbeing, mental health, and special school places. So that's where it sits from a strategic planning perspective. The key part of the jigsaw that we've been waiting for has been the school's white paper. And so now we know what government policy is going to be around education and about special educational needs. We have that additional information to inform the plan of what we're going to do long term on the island. Now, for example, one of the things that in the school's white paper, is a move towards increased academisation. So encouraging schools to academise. Now that's a big topic. We could come back to it in a later item around school place planning, but that also informs what we need to do locally in terms of our specialist provision. There's also lots of information in the white paper around the role of specialist provision in terms of outreach to mainstream provision. So how can we use the expertise we have in schools like Medina House to help improve inclusion in mainstream schools? So it's a huge topic which we now need to reflect on, digest what the white paper is saying. In fact, Beth and I this afternoon, 3 till 5, were in a 2-hour meeting with DfE South East Regions Group talking about the white paper, what it means and what are the implications for children and local areas. So I think that, by the summer, we will have a clearer picture about this, because what we need to do is pull together the needs of children, what's coming through the system, what we've currently got, and then work with school colleagues on what the future looks like, what resources we have. So, for example, in December, when the DfE announced that they were going to essentially cancel the previously agreed special free school for social, emotional, mental health, and instead give us £4.1 million of capital funding over 3 years, that's new news. So we've got that money. It's within our gift to spend it how we want. We want to work with school leaders to decide how that happens. And now we've got the white paper as well. I think we've got the final piece of the jigsaw. So we do have a plan, but it has to be adapted through this emerging information.
So we'll be having a revised plan at some point this year? Yes?
So we are...
I mean, the resources, that's all that I'm trying.
Yeah. So what we've said to school leaders about it is that we need some time to reflect, digest, think. We've arranged a meeting on is it the 9th of June? We've booked the Riverside for the afternoon of the 9th of June to bring all school leaders together to have a workshop style session with them on what the physical infrastructure might look like and other things around implementing the white paper. So that's our plan. I hope out of that we'll have, you know, a shared view about where we want to go. And yes, by the end of the calendar year, certainly we'll have a more informed plan.
One question, you know, obviously I support the expansion of Medina House. I've been to school several times and I support it. I think Council has made a great point. In an ideal world, the blank sheet of paper, you'd build a brand spanking new, probably 2 centres of excellence across the island. But so my question is, £1.5 million is the cost of this this agreement. Is that part of the 4.1 million, or is that part of it? It says it comes from a high needs capital funding allocation. If that's a separate pot, is there still money in that existing pot to cover any more expansions we do at primary schools that have got spare buildings or spare classrooms or spare areas?
So what paragraph is that in?
Paragraph 17, talk about 1.5 billion coming
Yeah.
from the high needs capital funding.
So
So is there anything else in that pot left for other expansions?
Yeah.
And is that part of 4.1 million?
So I break the funding and financing around this into 3 bits basically. We get every year a high needs capital allocation, which we get every year. We've then got, in addition, the 4.1 over 3 years. And then the third element to the financing of this is the revenue funding, essentially, which is what has historically come out of the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant. But the government has said they are going to centralise from financial year 28-29 onwards, and we don't really know how that's going to work. So more information to follow. We again were in a meeting yesterday. We have a subgroup of schools forum that looks at the high needs block, and we actually joined at that meeting by our Department for Education advisor, Mark McCurry, who's been a great support for the island. And we asked him the question of when are we going to get more information about this? When are we going to get more information about how the proposals in the white paper are going to be funded? And it's to follow in due course.
Councillor Lilly, Michael.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions that sort of came out at me in the report. One was, it says on page 152, 37, that the former Old Barton Primary School houses Howard House homeless shelter, right? And those 2 will be alongside. How's that going to work in reality?
So there have been discussions about that exact point. And these proposals are possible to do without impacting the homeless shelter at all. There were some other options which would have impacted it, which would have had bigger ramifications. Thank you. But this proposal allows the homeless shelter to carry on exactly as it is, and for the expansion to happen because it's at the other side of the building, different entrance, etc.
Okay, so I was particularly indicating safeguarding issues that could actually arise out of that. And it's interesting to know that the education estate strategy, which has just come out, actually talks about how schools should be in the future and their space. So well, if that's taken on board. But my last one is transport costs, because at the moment we have eligible as 1,720 in your figures. Are there going to be increased transport costs? Because I presume the young people the children coming to this centre will come from all over. So is it as anticipated that the eligible figure of transport is going to go up?
So the children whose needs require a special school to be met will have an education and healthcare plan. So all schools, all children at a special school basically will have an education and healthcare plan. They will have, therefore, a right to have access to transport, and the local authority has a statutory duty to provide that. So that links to what I said earlier in the performance report about the correlation between spend on transport and the increase in education and healthcare plans.
Basically, it's going up. Thank you.
Are there any more hands? No? Okay, so I'll move to the recommendation. And the recommendation is that the committee agrees for public notices to be published in accordance with section 19, subsection 1 of the Education and Inspections Act 2006 for expansion of place at Medina House School, 168 to 204 places, with 36 places being provided at the satellite provision located at the site of the former Old Barton Primary School, which I'll propose from the chair. Seconder, Councillor Andre. All those in favour? Thank you. That's agreed. So we'll move to 8D, which is the early years childcare sufficiency assessment draft, which is obviously for noting rather than decision, but it's a really important and well-written document. So, Lawrence, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give you a brief overview on some of the headline figures from this year's report. So the Childcare Sufficiency Assessment is our annual look at early years and increasingly school-aged childcare here on the island. It's been a year of stability, growth and adaptation. Stability in the number of providers that are delivering early years, growth in the number of children accessing the new working parent entitlements, and adaptation in terms of how our providers have pivoted their business models to support the delivery of these new entitlements. So overall, the number of childcare places being delivered by the sector has only gone up slightly by 1.2% over the last year, while the number of providers has stayed steady. We have 76 independent providers. They are made up of 12 schools, 34 private, voluntary and independent organisations and businesses, and 30 childminders who deliver a variety of childcare for early years. The provision is spread geographically across the island, so we have no communities that are not served by early years provision. Part of the one of the interesting kind of trends in the past year has been the growth in the number of childminders kind of coming on board after 5 years of declining numbers, which have again mirrored the picture nationally in terms of the decline in kind of childminding. We've seen the number of childminders go up by 7.1%, which is, and we have still further childminders in the pipeline that we're hoping to bring on stream this year. So a good development for the sector itself. The working parent entitlements was the major change in terms of funded childcare, and that came in September, the final phase, which opened up to 30 hours of funded childcare for qualifying parents, working parents on the island. What we saw was that has brought in an increase of about 21% in terms of the number of children accessing this particular entitlement, which is now central to funded childcare in early years. Turning to quality in early years provision, 100% of those providers that were inspected by Ofsted in 2025 achieved good or outstanding, and 96% of those childminders that were inspected as well in that period achieved the same outcome. So we're very pleased to maintain that quality in terms of provision. Turning to school-aged childcare, and this is something that we will be reporting on in more depth in the future, but in 2025, the HAF programme, the Holiday Activities and Food Programme, delivered across the 3 school holidays, allowing 2,200 children to access a whole range of different activities and food provision through 21 providers across 34 venues in every community on the island. And we're able to offer those children attending a whole range of different activities they might not have previously accessed, including arts, theatre, dance, surfing, horse riding, and football. We've also heard at the end of 2025 that the HAF programme is being extended by another 3 years through to 2029. So we're very pleased that we'll be able to continue to deliver across the school holidays and also across the half term. So October half term this year, we will be delivering the HAF programme for the first time. Just finally on the school age childcare, the wraparound childcare programme has achieved some significant success over the last year. We've increased the number of primary schools offering full wraparound childcare, and that's starting at 8 a.m. and finishing at 6 p.m. around the school day. Beginning of the year, we had 26% of our primary schools offering that. By the end of the year, we pushed that figure up to 38%, and also creating 210 new places in existing provision across those schools as well. So all in all, I'm pleased to say that at the end of 2025, we had a resilient, high quality and responsive childcare system providing quality childcare for early years and increasingly a more comprehensive coverage of school age childcare across the island. Thank you, Chair.
Florence, thank you very much for your detailed report. Members, questions? Councillor Andre, unless someone's got a question.
It's more of a comment really than a question. You mentioned about the holiday activity and food schemes, which I think I was actually in post when they were introduced, and it's absolutely fantastic to see not only, although there's obviously a correlation between the two, but to see the number of providers and the variety of activities that the children can engage in. And also, as you said, it's across the island, so it's accessible. And I think it's important to say that it is inclusive as well. So a lot of our children with special educational needs and disabilities actually access the holiday activity and food programme. And to see the actual numbers growing year on year and to hear that it's extended for 3 years, I think is absolutely brilliant. You mentioned about the wraparound care, which I think is really, really welcomed. 38% for the complete offer, but there's 59% of primary schools a partial offer. So I think that's the whole, so it's not just that complete offer, it's the partial offer as well. So I think there's some really positive things happening there. Really pleased.
Thank you, Councillor Andre, thank you. Councillor Love.
Thank you, Chair. I'm automatically drawn always to the word risk. Always, sadly. But point 26, I'm just a little bit concerned about the consumable additional charges and extra charges, what we're talking about there and how much roughly, for what, and the impact on those children who live in families with low incomes and their ability to be able to access these additional services. What we're talking about here, and how much and how many children will that exclude or prevent from participating as we would hope. Meanwhile, I want to say to you, thank you for the report. Sorry, because yeah, it is really, it's a good report. And I think it does bring some inspiration to it because we're getting more services. But of course, I'm always going to be drawn to the, what about those who were excluded by their own social economic?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, it is an emerging issue that a number of our providers are increasingly using kind of consumable charges to add on.
What do you mean by consumable? Sorry.
The funded childcare, the funded place, the funding that's supplied by DFE to pay for the childcare itself only covers so much of the costs involved in delivering that childcare. So there are a number of items that it doesn't include, and that's what they are. And the problem is that the Department for Education has not been strict enough in saying what should be included and they pay for through the funding, and what parents need to pay paid for on top.
Sorry to press you, I know you don't really want, but what are those items? What are we talking about?
It depends on the provider, and it does include access to information through some of the online kind of like things, systems like Tapestry, which provide detailed updates on what the child has been doing during the day. It does include kind of like food, snacks, nappies, a whole range of other things that might not be included within the funded childcare itself. But it does, and the problem at the moment is that it differs from provider to provider what they are charging. And that's something that we are looking at in more detail to make sure that they abide by the Department for Education's regulations in this area.
Do we have any evidence of anybody not being able to access these services because of this? Have we looked at that?
We haven't got any evidence so far, but I think the risk is that there is the benefit of the funded entitlement. So what we've seen is a lot of working parents have really benefited from the fact that their childcare is now kind of paid for in effect, rather than that kind of like many of them working just to pay for the childcare. So there's been a boost to their income. That is beginning to be eroded by some of these extra charges that the providers are putting on. It's not all of them, and I will say it does tend to be more of the chain childcare providers that.
So
Keep going, Carl.
I'm really interested to hear this. What I think that we need to know as a committee is that children who live in areas of deprivation, where there's high levels of poverty, are not being excluded by their own social economic situation. And so if this is occurring, I would like to know, I don't like putting labels on communities, but I would like to know what it is that needs to be done to change that. Because clearly for me, if you're living in poverty and you're living with financial difficulties, you are prevented from going out to work by the additional cost potentially. And I don't know what those risks are because I don't know what those costs are. So I would like to see a report that tells us the difference between those who can and those who cannot, because then we've got a basis for being able to provide potentially some support, haven't we? If we don't know what the dynamics are. So, and I know it's a moving feast, and I don't want you to do massive amounts of work, but I'm still thinking those young children will be excluded because of some of those things, and we need to make sure that they're not. What are we doing about that? Which is the next step, I suppose.
Absolutely, Councillor. No, I will say that the consumable charges tend to be focused more on the working parent entitlements. So those those more disadvantaged families aren't being affected as much by these consumable charges. They are voluntary, so the parent doesn't have to pay for them, but then will have to provide those items should they kind of like need to themselves for their child. But it is something, that's why I highlighted it in as a risk, and that is something that we will be looking at this year and monitoring and ensuring that the providers do stick to the regulations in this area.
I'm really pleased that you've included that here. I'm not pleased about what I'm reading, but I'm really, because a problem known about is a problem that we can work on to resolve.
Absolutely.
But I am really concerned that there are some people who may well be excluded, and hopefully you'll be able to come back, which I'm suggesting to the chair, is with a report perhaps as soon as you're able to inform us about that, so that we can look at what we might be able to do about it. I'd like to propose that we have a report brought back to us.
If the committee would like that, I will come back with
I think
more
we can add that
details.
to the work plan. We can start shaping a new work plan with that as an agenda item in the future, certainly.
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
thank you again. Thank you for your report, because we do need to get on top of that.
Councillor Liddy, Michael.
I just wanted to make a comment. It sort of links to Councillor Andre said, I actually visited Wild Heart Sanctuary. Wild Heart Sanctuary. The yes, I did. But I actually spent about a couple of hours there with as a I was invited as vice chair to visit, and I have to say it was actually excellent. But the mix of the children were quite. You did have a complete social mix of children from different backgrounds, children in care that were actually all integrated together, and I thought that was extremely good. And it was also a very good use of that facility. There were children there that wouldn't normally be able to afford to go to see the bears and whatever, and they were able to, and I thought that was extremely good. So I think that needs to be so complimented, that the HAF is really, I think, enabling children to expand their horizons and their socialisation. So
For those who didn't see Councillor Andre's email this week, I did visit the Ulverston Animal Park, and yes, I did feed it. I did feed the goat while I was there, so yes, I did. But I think it's a really good report. It's some good. I like the fact that we are increasing childminders, which bucks national trend. I think it's really, really good piece of work for the island. And 100% Ofsted good or outstanding. Also, they should be, but the fact that you get 100% in anything, I think, is fantastic to achieve. It's 100% really hard to do. But one question actually on under the background. I'm sorry, on point 3.89, you talk about phase 2 of the program, inviting the free breakfast club program. Only one of our schools actually qualified in phase 2. 40% or higher free school meals. Was that 35 in phase 1? Have the government moved the goalpost from 35 to 40? Because I was led to believe that the first round was 35%.
I believe they did, but also they are inviting those schools that are on the National Breakfast Club programme to transition across as well. So while we've just got at the moment the early adopters in Barton and Gatton and Lake, and then Brading will be joining in the summer term, and then the 4 schools that are currently on the National Breakfast Club programme are being asked to move over for September. So and they're all schools with very high FSM.
I just found it odd that if the first round only had 2 schools on the island, moving the goalpost higher, you don't get any more, don't it? The government moved the goalpost up, and I think a lot of, I can't speak from my town council. A lot of parish and town councils are now funding primary school breakfast clubs because the government keep moving their goalposts from 35 to 40. So, I know one school that was at 33.5%, didn't quite meet the threshold. Now they move the goalpost to 40. Well, of course they don't meet the threshold. So parish councils are now stepping in and funding those breakfast clubs, which is commendable, but wrong. But but for one school to qualify this time that's better than none, I suppose, isn't it?
It is, Chair. I think that the Department for Education has slowed up the rollout of the programme, so hence the change in percentages that qualified.
In the end, being non-political, no comment. Are there any further questions? Okay. So can I first thank you for the report? It's really detailed. I know you have to do it every year, and I think the comment around the feedback and the comeback from Councillor Love was appropriate to bring that back onto the work plan. So the recommendation for noting that this committee, having been presented with the statutory childcare sufficiency assessment in Appendix 1, notes the local authority has met its statutory duty to secure sufficient early years childcare for parents on the islands of the Isle of Wight. So all those in favour of noting the report? Thank you very much. So we move on to 8E. Do we want a 5-minute comfort break? Are we happy to carry on? Okay. Last chance. Okay, we'll move on to paper 8E, which is the school place planning consultation outcomes, for Ashley and Beth to present.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification, although the title says it's consultation outcomes, for good order's sake, I should say that it wasn't a formal consultation. It was more a period of engagement with stakeholders from across the system. So this report relates to the Isle of Wight's education strategy, which is the strategy to improve outcomes for all island children through until 2030. The vision of that strategy is that all children on the Isle of Wight will be equipped with the skills and aspirations to access opportunities of their choice. And the strategy has 5 key elements to it, and these are our promises to island children. The first thing is about high aspirations. The second is about developing rich curricular experiences with meaningful pathways into adulthood. The third is about high quality special educational needs and disabilities provision for children and young people. The fourth is about a highly trained workforce with a range of continued professional development and clear career routes. And the fifth is the development of a sustainable education infrastructure. And school place planning relates specifically to that fifth pillar or promise that we have within the island's education strategy. There are 4 recommendations, which we'll return to after I've just made a few points, if that's okay. The background section of the paper provides you with the latest information about the state of play relating to the difference between the number of places that we have on the island for island primary school children and the numbers of children that we actually have. So paragraph 4, the table shows you how the decrease has been quite significant. You can see that in year 6, the total number of children in year 6 is 1,349, and the numbers of children in reception is 1,033. So you can see that there, over the period of one child passing through primary school, the numbers of children in a year group is decreasing by about 300 a year. Now, there are other things going on here in terms of children perhaps leaving to do elective home education, or they might be leaving and going into the private system, for example. But you can see that overall the picture is quite clear. Paragraph 5 is the summary. The previous data was for the autumn 2025 school census. So that's actual in this academic year. Paragraph 5 is a look forward to what's happening in September 26. Now, after the PAN adjustments, which we alluded to in the earlier report, the number of reception places available in September 26 is 1,289. That's the sum of all the PANs across the 37 island primary schools. The numbers of applications that we currently have is 1,010, so the difference is 279. So in terms of reception places for September 26, the difference is 279. Paragraph 6 gives a summary of the financial situation of our maintained primary schools. So although we have 37 total primary schools, 31 of them are maintained. The numbers have actually been equalised through that period. So because we have reduced the numbers of primary schools over time, we've equalised it throughout to allow comparisons over time. But what you can see is that at the end of the previous financial year, for example, there were 8 maintained primary schools that were in debt. So that's not just negative in-year cash flow, it's in debt. At the end of this financial year, the forecast is that there will be 10 in debt. This is basis the November 25 financial forecast that schools submit. And the forecast for the end of next financial year is that it will be 14 in debt. And you can see that that is driven by an increase in the numbers of schools that are experiencing an in-year overspend. So 18 in financial year 24-25 up to 23 this year. And you can see how that translates into the combined balances of all maintained primary schools. So at the end of last financial year, combined balances of all maintained primary schools was about 3 million. The system as a whole this financial year is forecast to overspend by about 1.5 million. That will reduce the combined balances down to 1.5. And looking forward into end of financial year 26-27, the forecast is that the system will lose about £2.5 million. That will take the combined balances to be negative in the region of £1 million. Paragraph 7 deals with the point that's been made consistently over a period of time by school leaders about the impact that a very challenging financial situation has on their ability to improve outcomes for children. And there's a snapshot there about how island outcomes relate to nationals. There's a clear linkage between the financial situation of a school and its ability to improve outcomes. That's explained there in paragraph 7. What you'll see in the paper, also in the appendices, is a summary of this engagement work that's happened. So there's a summary around the thoughts of parents and carers. There's a one-page synopsis of a meeting that happened, which many of you were at in November with Island head teachers. There are the views of trade unions. There's the minutes of a meeting held with both dioceses, and then there are 2 letters received since then from the 2 dioceses. I should say that Councillor Andre and Councillor Brading have been involved in much of this work. The appendix which is missing relates to the views and opinions of children and young people. And if I may, I'd like to just read out the summary of the event that was held with children and young people, which came in slightly after the publication date of the paper. If I may just summarise what young people have said about this. So they said this: we think about schools and where children should go. Sorry, when we think about schools and where children should go, we care most about feeling like we belong and knowing we'll be safe, supported and able to learn. This is what we like about our school day. We like a school that feels the right size, where you can know who everyone is and find everything easily. Break times and lunch times matter a lot. We like time to run around. Some of us like separate playtimes. We notice when older pupils, like in year 6, have responsibilities. That can help the school feel organised. Quiet places are important, but we think there should be more quiet space where things feel busy or noisy. Sorry, when things feel busy or noisy. This is what matters most when choosing a school. We want schools with sports and information technology. We want a kind school where everyone is good and people show kindness. Teachers really matter, and we want school to feel right by having fun as well as learning. This is what worries us about moving schools. Leaving friends and starting again is a big worry. Other kids, friends, friendships. We worry about being bullied, especially by older children. This is what would make school better. If we were decision makers, what would we change? A stronger all-round curriculum. A bit more help when we need it. Better equipment and resources. More breaks. More support for belonging. We notice when staff are really nice. More resources for the special educational needs coordinator and for those needing special educational needs and disabilities support. Plan schools so children can feel known, safe and included. Make sure transitions protect friendships and reduce bullying worries. Build in calm, quiet spaces and enough staffing and resources. Consider travel carefully. Some of us get the bus to secondary school, and we travel further if a school offers something we're passionate about. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Just some couple of quick comments from me, actually. When you read the paper, if you put it into context, 279 surplus places, if they were all full, just over £5,100 per pupil, there's £1.5 billion of extra money that will be in the coffers, because our schools are still funded per pupil. And Councillor Lovell, and only 8 schools are going to be in surplus this year. And for those of us that are school governors, or go to your local schools regularly, you'll realise, what pressure schools are under. And Councillor Love made a good point about where he always focuses on the risk of a paper. If you read the risk section in this paper, which I hope everyone has, there's some pretty, alarming risks that show up in there, Carl. So you're quite right.
Avoided the risks on this one.
Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. So if we go back to table 4, which where we started, so we lost about 300 from the number that we had as an intake over the 6 years. So we're dropping by about 50 a year. And then if we go on to the figure that was quoted earlier, I know it was mentioned by several people, the 279, that is only the number of spare places in the reception class. And you're going to come back with how many spare places there are in each class, all the way through the education system. I know that that's a little bit difficult because, for example, in the college, they manage their numbers by taking courses off the curriculum if there aren't enough people on it. So it won't be a balance, but they do have empty spaces as well, all the way through. And I suspect the number of total educational empty spaces on the island is very high. It would not surprise me how many thousands that comes out to. So the 279 would indicate, would it not, that we have roughly, let's say a PAN is 30, that we have roughly 9 reception classes too many on the island. And the average reduction of 50 a year would mean that in addition to having 9 too many already, we should be losing beyond that roughly 1 reception class per year.
If I can answer that, I think it may even be more than 9, because some reception classes at the smaller schools are 15 or
I was
20 or so. And I think the thing about the 300 that Ashley referred to, obviously, is that 1,033. If that plays through every year becomes year 1, year 2, it becomes the norm right through all the years, because the birth rate is still predicted, I believe, over the next few years still to be on the on the downward spiral. It's not like we haven't got to the bottom of the trough, I don't think, yet, have we, on regard birth rate?
No.
So it just highlights, I think, the issue. But yes.
Yeah, Chair, I was just saying, roughly, let's assume an average PAN of 30. That would mean we've got 9 reception classes too many now, and that we, on the numbers dropping, we should be losing at least 1 more every year. So if we lost 9 now, and we would lose 1 more next year, 1 the year after that, 1 the year after that, on the current plan, based on the number of on the need. Is that a rough summary of it?
So there are a number of assumptions in this, aren't there? Because we could then have a discussion about, is immigration to the island going to increase, etc. But on the basis of what we know now, and on the basis that the national education system is based on a system which assumes a class size of 30, although it's also true that there's an example of a school I can think of on the island which has a healthy budget, which actually runs a model where they have 25 in a class, not 30. But if you're correct in your analysis of if we assume that a class size would be 30 dividing into 279, coupled with the fact that there is also significant surplus capacity in high year groups as well.
So the supplementary to that then comes on to the accounting side of it, which is when we add up that throughout the totality of years and that all of the schools, the thousands of empty spaces, it's not just, Chair, the figure that you quoted for how much money we're losing in reception, but the totality of money that we're losing from all of those empty spaces in all of those years is an absolutely staggering amount of money for the island. And it's not really money that we're just losing. We can look at it the other way, which feeds onto the two tables, that what we're doing is we're creating debt because those schools are progressively using up their reserves. That's what the chart shows, and then going into debt, and then that debt just continues. There's no table here extrapolating out beyond 26, 27 that shows a turnaround on that. So the forecast is that more schools will, with the current system and all the assumptions we've got, will continue to use up their reserves, will continue to fall into debt and effectively become unsustainable eventually with that. But there is a requirement, I believe, is there not, that schools who run concurrently at debt have to come back with a recovery plan to get out of the debt? And are we getting those plans being brought forward?
Yes. So the council's finance team are proactive in that regard. And indeed, I mean, for example, Beth and I met with finance colleagues and the school just last week about that. And you're right, if this situation continues in terms of the deterioration in wider school finances, it's a reasonable expectation that there will be more schools that are expected to deliver their financial recovery plans to the council. Of course, that requires more resource for the council to be proactive with schools around that as well.
Councillor Love, Carl, so Chris, Councillor, did you have a supplementary question first? Yeah.
I was going to, it's more of an observation to the figure you mentioned earlier. You know, there is no current plan to revoke this, and the only way to change this materially is either the government, assuming the government doesn't change the funding model, is that we have lots more children come to the island, and net immigration policy of children will be good, or we close quite a large number of schools to balance the books. Those are the only two solutions I can see to this.
Councillor Love, Carl.
Yes, Chair, there's an awful lot in this report, and again, and it must have taken a lot of put together. There's a lot of unknowns. Sorry, and there's a lot of unknowns in this. We have to think about this in a number of ways, not just about our schools and where we are now, because whilst we're talking about receptions and others, we can see that in 5 years from now, that will have impacts upon secondary education, our college, our entire workforce for the island, which is already creaking, let's be honest about it, in terms of huge shortages. But it's actually about the quality of education that young people get. Until we fix this in terms of the numbers and the pans that we're taking in, we won't be able to make significant inroads in the recovery, if you would like, of the quality and standards of education on our island. And I'm not criticising specific schools or just saying, if a school is having to think about its finances as a priority in terms of staying alive, it's not thinking about how we increase attainment and achievement within schools. And there is no choice. This has huge implications about our industries being able to run businesses here on the island with workforce moving forward. So we have to do a number of things. We have to increase the number of people living on the island. That means having more housing in order to service the needs of what we've currently got. Or we have to significantly downsize everything and risk losing industries and businesses because we haven't got the population to be able to feed it. Or we have to have a cheap ferry service which enables commuting at an affordable rate. And I'm sorry, I know I'm going slightly off, but I'm trying to look at the bigger picture. This is not just about what is happening now. This is about the whole future of our island, its education system, and being able to run an island that has one of the largest elderly populations in Great Britain. So we need to do something beyond what we're just talking about here. So I'm wondering,
What is the bigger plan to address this? Because I'm not sure that this council has a plan which goes from naught to, I'll say 80 for the sake of it, being able to fulfill all of those educational needs through that and being able to service and grow our island economy. Where is the plan? Is there a plan? Because if there isn't a plan, there certainly needs to be a plan, because otherwise we're talking about education in isolation from the employment need to the inward immigration of island people to what we need to do in the future. I think from my perspective, we've become so narrowly focused upon what is now an essential need to address these places that we've forgotten about the bigger picture, and the community is forgetting about why we need to do this. We need to bring more people to the island to service the needs of this community. That means having an excellent and above average school system. And we're not going to be able to fix that unless we can fix the school places. So I'm sorry, I've had a bit of a rant, haven't I? But I'm asking the question, where is the bigger, for the whole council, not just us here today, where is the bigger plan to resolve each of those sections in line with the population demographs?
I think you just set out the plan, councillor. Would you like to comment?
Huge, but we have to deal with it.
You made some really appropriate points, and I totally agree with you. I'm sure everyone in this room totally agrees with everything you just said. So I'll let that Mr. Whitaker respond.
Thank you. Oh,
I'll just pick up on a couple of things, Councillor Love, you said. So in the final paragraph of the synopsis of the meeting with head teachers, I'll just read out a bit. It says, and the number of secondary school places should be dealt with at the same time as much as possible. So there was definitely a view from head teachers that where we can, we should be thinking about the long term as much as possible. In terms of the education system and the employment on the island, and so I guess it links to what we were talking about earlier around developing the workforce of the future. So it is about developing education and vocational pathways that needs to be linked to the employers on the island now and future employers on the island, so that the workforce can be developed. In children's services, we go from kind of preconception, because what happens preconception is really important in terms of, you know, healthy children, etc. And we go up to 25. And so I'll be able to cop out of answering your fuller question by saying that's, I think, a wider council matter to do, presumably with our colleagues who work in regeneration and the like.
Councillor Hendry's next. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the number 279 again, one thing to say for parents, it's quite good to have some surplus in the system. When we compare ourselves to other authorities, how do we compare with the amount of surplus places we have compared to other authorities? And if a magic number we're trying to aim to hit?
So how do we compare with other authorities? So in the meeting with the Department for Education this afternoon, you know, when we were talking about this topic and the relevance to what was put in the white paper, London was referred to, and certain London boroughs are seeing a similar, very significant decrease in the numbers of children, and they are actively closing schools. So including academy schools. So academies are closing as well. I agree that it is appropriate to have a surplus in the system because you know, we have a statutory duty to provide a school place for every child. So if children, for example, decided to leave the private school system and go into the state system, then we need to have some capacity. If a child arrives from elsewhere, we need to have capacity in the system to do that. But a surplus capacity of 10% or less than 10% would be something that would be generally seen to be an appropriate surplus capacity. So that would be a reasonable number, I think.
Councillor Mosdale, Claire.
thank you. it's all very sterile, isn't it? When you look at the recommendation, you know, we understand, everyone in this room, that, you know, this is a huge priority and it does need to be dealt with. But we're coming up to elections. I'm not standing again, as I keep repeatedly saying to everybody, but I also think that there's such a change in politics at the moment. There'll be lots of people in this room who are brilliant councillor, have been part of the journey, but actually won't get re-elected. So I think there needs to be an understanding of the lessons that need to be have learnt from this, the devastation that it caused, the staff within this council and within the schools that not once but twice were put up for closure, who were never given a lifeline to regain a level playing field, because if your name has gone on the list, you are never ever going to make it back without just a phenomenal amount of help and support, etc. So my fear is that we will go into a new council in June and this will come forward and we won't learn those lessons. And there were definite lessons to learn that we have. And I don't see that glaringly enough. I saw some of the emails that were sent to head teachers that actually to send it, you know, to ask head teachers not to tell their staff when they're already incredibly pressured was just too much to ask. I think, yes, there is nobody that doesn't agree. We've got too many schools, not enough children being born, and something needs to be done. But this needs to be dealt with in a way that actually we were never going to manage. You know, Unison were right. We were never going to manage to close 6 schools, but and it was too much to nurture everybody through the system. So my question really is, it was things like, okay, to actually put in front of councillors that were plans for all of those school sites. You know, to read that as councillors when you weren't involved in the process was actually quite horrendous. And actually the press got it before we did. You know, I think the bravest person in this room second time round was Councillor Ront. You should have shut some of them the first time, but you know, second time round to hold that meeting and have to, yeah, I get it. I completely get it. We all agree schools need to be, you know, will look like they will need to be closed, but we need to do it on a level playing field with understanding and lessons learnt and a much more nurturing process on how it is done. And can we have some assurance? Because I personally, you know, sorry guys, I don't think many of the people that are sat here today, if they've got certain parties against them, will be back. Sorry, I don't think you will. So how do we assure you as officers who will still hear are going to make sure that process is better and people dealt with a much caring attitude and understanding than they were done on the last. We don't want history repeating itself.
Thank you, Councillor. So I agree that there were lessons to learn from last time, and I believe that those lessons have been learned, and we're committed to doing what's the right thing for children and families on this island. I would highlight, for example, paragraph 1 of the representations from the unions, which talks, for example, around a phased approach, 1 or 2 schools at a time. And it will be up to future committee to look at the options presented to them and to balance the views of our communities and children and for example, that kind of phased approach relative to what that means in terms of the financial situation of the schools and therefore the council. And it will be a case of balancing those options going forward. But what I can say is that as officers, what we're committed to is presenting the options to the future decision makers and working with those future decision makers, those future elected members on the pros and cons of those different options.
May, yeah.
Can we also remember that there needs to be quite a tight timeline, because at the moment I think committees make braver decisions because it's a shared decision. Remembering that this council will stay as a committee system for another year, but then government are actually going to remove committee systems and move into a cabinet system. So I think that needs to be entwined to how your decisions make, because the political faces will change here, but also the political decision making will change as well. So I think that all has to be tied up into what the world's going to look like in June when it comes to this.
I think the one thing I would add to that is that when this paper was being drafted, Councillor Andre and I fed into this paper, because we all recognise that this has been gone on for too long and not been addressed. We had to, and may change the world. Who knows? But we had to allow officers a direction to get on with this, because we cannot do nothing from now until the first time a new committee meets. It's dragged on for far too long, and the pressure in schools has grown and grown. You don't use this is a critical situation. We have to set officers on the go and do this. Officers have learnt, staff have learnt, unions have fed into, and Beth's done some great engagement with people, as have we. We met the head teachers, we met the unions a couple of weeks ago. Councillor Andre met the diocese, and we've engaged with young people. So all that's been fed in. We've got to give officers a sense of direction. If a new council decides to ignore this, that's their choice. But for us, the committee, we've got to set them on a path to deliver the right outcomes.
Sorry, can I, because I'm trying to have my say before I disappear. I don't think a new council can ignore this, because financially they cannot ignore this. This has to happen. But all I was trying to say is, can we make sure the serious lessons have been learned? And that was all the assurance I wanted. No council can ignore this, whatever political colour they're wearing.
Let's hope not. Councillor Richardson, Claire.
Thank you. I think we did try quite a few different aspects last time, because I think as a parent at the beginning of the process, I didn't know quite how bad it was, and I think I myself learned a lot through that. And then we did try to go out to the parents and tell them, and I think even when you do know the reality of it, you just don't want it to be that reality, and we are going to lose that sense of community in some places, and that is what they're most scared of. And I think we just keep coming back to that whatever lessons we've learned, it's going to be awful, and that's just a cycle, isn't it? And how do we get past that? It's really, really difficult. And I think we did try to sort, you said that knowing what the buildings were going to be used for is not a good thing, but then you want to know that it's not going to be sold off for housing. There was a plan, there was a need, something else, whatever special education was going to go in there, that's something we really needed. So to put that in, I didn't see that as a bad thing. So I don't know, we try all these different things, and we say learn lessons, but actually it still doesn't help the situation. So I don't know what I want to say, but it's just that, we've been such a journey already, and whoever takes on in next is going to have to almost start again, because you learn how we've got to this situation, and it hasn't changed. As someone living on the island, there's always a school closing, because it just keeps happening, doesn't it? And it just seems really bleak when you look at those numbers. So I don't know, we have to try and put some positive on it about what we have got, and that it's sort of looking at just it being numbers is really hard, because people don't want to know that when you're there at the school gates. It's not just numbers, it's not just attainment, it's not just where those schools are. There is so much to it, and I just needed to say that. Really, it's a bit like that. It's like, got to get it off the chest. It's really hard. We're living and breathing that all the time, and there's no easy answer to it. So
Best I'll give to you is, having been through it back in in 2019, whatever, closing schools is never ever going to be a popular thing to do. But if it's the right thing to do, then for the young people, that's what you've got to think when you're making those decisions. And so if whoever's on the committee post May, yes, it would be tough decisions to make, but if they're the right ones, and then the needed ones, and ultimately that's what we're elected to do. But you're right, of course you're right.
yeah, just to add to that, obviously people sort of say, oh, is it the right thing for the children? It feels like we've already been sacrificed for that middle schools or things, and it still hasn't helped the attainment. And that's what people just keep coming back to. Well, we've done that, and that doesn't work. Just closing schools doesn't help the children. So it's really hard to get public on board when they've just been burned and burned and burned. Sorry.
I I've got Councillor Churchman, next Vanessa.
Yes. Listening to all of this, what we're trying to do is to solve a problem which should never have happened. And the reason I say that, it all boils down at the end of the day to housing. The number of people who have said to me, I can't afford to have a family because where do I live? And if you think about the whole country, this is part of the reason people aren't having children. It isn't just about money, it is about accommodation. I know of 2 families who've left the island, one because they couldn't find anywhere to live that they could afford. So with 2 children, they left. Somebody else felt the education wasn't good enough. And I know I'm trying to be strategic and say, if we want to solve the problem for the future, we have got to talk about housing. I think Councillor Spink would agree with me, but I'm sure you can understand what I'm saying. Youngsters just cannot see themselves producing children because the basic lack of accommodation. Thank you, Chair.
I've got Councillor Lilly, next Michael.
Thank you, Chair. I think very much linking onto what Councillor Mosdale has said is we went through a process. We were actually on the scrutiny committee with that. And if you look at the comments in the various things, they're all very similar, whether it's from the unions, from the diocese, and that. And in fact, I think the diocese side sends it up. We ask, however, the essential consideration with potential ramification rationale is given to constructing a set of clear, measurable criteria to identify schools that should be considered for potential closure. You know, I think the lessons learned of that, because we've got to get all those stakeholders, the unions, the schools, right, the diocese and providers on board. I think the other particular thing is that, as it said, it's a moving feast. If you actually get, February, I've just read the education state strategy, which actually states the kinds of schools it's saying the old Victorian schools without playing fields should be phased out. It's actually saying there should be schools that have got land around them, that have got access to things. So in a sense, you've got to feed this strategy into the process now. And I think a range of criteria, as Councillor Chris has said, the community into the process. And I think if we listen to those voices that have said, I think we've got a chance to get it right. And I think a phased process, because we all, I think, agree that we're going to have to tackle the issue, or whoever's in power's got to tackle the issue. And I think you have got an opportunity now to put something, but if I am on the council, and I might not be, if I was there, I would want to know, when you come back with a report, I'd want to know the diocese was on board. I would not want to know the trade unions on board. I want to know that, because you're not going to be able to deliver it and implement it. Because at the end of the day, if you just take the diocese, for instance, they said right through the process that they would go to court and they would go to law, whether it was judicial or the school adjudicator, and they did. And they had the money and the resources to do it. We've got to learn and make sure that it doesn't land in court again, and that it can be delivered. And I think we're working closely with those people involved. The last point is about academies. That's really quite scary. That's what's being put forward. We've got Haylands who is coming under the Lift Trust, right? The Lift Academy. So you've actually got schools moving that way. And we've got to be able to work with the DFE and actually get them included in some way, which has happened in London, and we need to learn from other areas on. Thank you. But I'm happy, Chair, to propose that we accept the recommendation.
I think we've got a few more people that want to talk yet. And I know Councillor Andre already touched on Dice's meeting as well. So Councillor Andre, Debbie.
Thank you, Chair. I have lived and breathed this along with officers, parents, most importantly, our children, teachers, for the last 5 years. I remember at the full council meeting when I was first appointed as cabinet member, one of the very first things that I faced was the potential closure of Chillerton and Rookley. And I learned through that. Am I carry on? Or are you? Okay. And I learned through that how challenging it would be. And in fact, we ended up coming to a situation where there were no children left. I'd like to thank Councillor Mosdell for her kind words. Let's be very clear here. We've heard a lot of talk about finances, but the overriding priority here is to improve educational outcomes. And as Councillor Love said, it's not a single issue, it's a very complex issue. Nobody wants to close schools, but there are very few options open to us. I commend officers, absolutely. Yes, there are lessons learned, but from my perspective, the criteria that have been laid out were clear. Mr. Whitaker alluded to the decision makers. And for me, I have to be honest, this is my biggest regret, that councillors as decision makers had the opportunity in 2022 to close 3 schools and didn't take that opportunity. Once schools are named, I think the biggest mistake that we made was not following through. And I bitterly regret the upset that was caused to everyone involved, to teachers, to the children, to parents. That should never have happened. And for me, I think that is the biggest lesson that we need to learn here. Not from the officers, whose work I think was absolutely exemplary, but it's as the decision makers, we need to have the courage to put the politics aside and actually do the right thing by our children. And I think once those schools are named, we have to follow through with it. Nobody wants it to be their own school, but the damage that has been done by naming schools and then not making that decision, I think is far worse. And I'd just like to finish by saying, in answer, I think, to Councillor Mosdell, actually part of the recommendations are that we, C and D, we agree that the first meeting of this committee under the new administration should consider recommendations on how to realise this reduction in school places, and also that we delegate authority to the Strategic Director of Children's Services to work, I think that should really say continue to work with stakeholders between now and that committee, expected to be in June, July, on the specifics of those recommendations. We need, this committee here and now needs to give a mandate to officers to get on with it. But there are lessons to be learned, but I think the biggest mistake was naming the schools and then not following through with it. Thank you.
And Councillor Jarman, just to pick up Councillor Liddy's points, we have, as a committee, we've engaged now with the unions. We engaged with head teachers, which was incredibly well attended. We've engaged with the diocese to discuss what they want from the proposal, the process, and that's all been taken into consideration. And as I was mentioning, the unions last week, they want another meeting. So depending on who the committee is, straight after the first full council in May, there'll be the intention to have another meeting with the head teachers, another meeting with the dioceses, another meeting with the unions to keep that dialogue going. So ultimately, everyone is on the same page. Whoever painful that page is, everyone will end up on the same page. And we've started the process. Officers have started the process. Beth's been engaging with everyone, happy to do so. Feedback from unions was the engagement with Beth was really encouraging and positive. Beth at the same diocese meeting. Everyone is getting on the same page, as is mentioned, to address the problem. So I've got 3 people more that want to speak.
Sorry, Chair, if
sorry.
I may,
Yes, you may.
just on that note, I think, can we make a slight amendment to the recommendation? Because, as you've alluded to, work has already been ongoing. So I think that
Come back
yeah,
to that second,
okay.
yeah. I'll just show the other, Councillor Jarman and Councillor Mosdale speak, and then we'll come back to recommendations. Michael takes your point.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're all in agreement. I mean, yes, all the stakeholder engagement has progressed very nicely. Yes, we need to name the schools. Yes, it has profound implications on communities. I mean, we all know these things very well. The only thing I would probably add to that list is that when we do name the schools, and whether it's 9 and then 1 every year beyond that, that we announce the totality of the plan. Because the worst thing for children and teachers and communities is to have a school that closes and you move this cohort of children to school B, and then 2 years later you close school B and you move them to school C, and then you close school C and move them to D. That level of disruption in education is profoundly awful. So when we have a plan, it needs to be in its totality, and so that everybody knows what it is over a number of years, what that rolling plan is going to achieve.
It's a very interesting point. Councillor Love asked the most amazing question at the unions meeting the other week, where Councillor Love said to the unions, if, for example, the council decided to close 6 schools, and they're going to do it in 3 phases of 2, Councillor Love asked the unions, would you prefer all 6 to be named in one go, phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3, or just name for example, the 2 schools in phase 1? And the unions couldn't answer it. So at the next union meeting, we would ask that question again, because we asked the unions for their input. What would they prefer? 6, 1, 2, and 3 phases, or just name phase 1? And they couldn't answer. We asked that 3 times during the meeting, documented in the notes, and they could not answer that question. We need their help and guidance on that. And we didn't get any answer from them at all. But it's a good point, and that would have to be ironed out as part of the process. Ashley.
Councillor Jarman, thanks for that point. Can I just respond briefly on it in this way? So there are pros and cons with all the options. And I think with that option, there are pros that you have outlined. There might also be cons. So for example, in that scenario, what may well happen is that you see significant flight of children to a different school anyway. And so that school, which then has been said, well, you're going to stay open for 3 years, their role would likely very significantly decrease because many parents would choose to move immediately. And their fixed costs would unlikely to be able to decrease in line with their reduction in income, which would be linked to the numbers of children who departed. So that is a potential scenario, and it may be possible to wind a school down in a considered fashion over years, but there would also likely to be negative connotations of that in the same way that there would likely be cons. And I think that's what officers' job is, to make sure that if that is a proposal that's presented, that we're able to articulate the pros and cons to that to the decision makers.
You may.
So I think that's exactly right, Ashley. But what you're doing there is you're building into the plan the anticipation of that flight in it. So you know that by announcing all those schools, you're giving parents the time to actually deal with those changes. They know not to move their children from A to B if B is going to close in 2 years' time. So they have the confidence to place their children in schools which are going to be sustainable in the long term. And that's very, very important. So I think you'd anticipate what you've just done within the plan itself. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Mosdale and Councillor Love, then we'll move this forward. So I want to allow time for the last item on the agenda. So Councillor Mosdale, Claire.
Mine's just a quickie. I don't, this is my last meeting, as I keep reiterating, but I don't think enough credit, Councillor Andre prompted my saying how she lived and breathed it for so many years. I think not enough credit's given to Councillor Brading, who has lived this for 9 years and actually closed a school successfully and bravely. Cabinet on the Road being chosen in Freshwater when that school was named was running the gauntlet completely. And I will be pounding the streets, even though I'm not the same political party as him anymore, to help him get re-elected. But actually, when he did that over these years, and what you've given to education, you thanked everybody else here and officers, but I don't think we gave enough respect to what you've given, Councillor Brading, to education, to children's services, and the hours that you have given in, and the commitment and the knowledge that you've gained over the last 9 years. So I know it's a little bit off topic, but you were really brave. You did close a school well, and you did it well and managed. And I just want to say thank you, not only for being my colleague, but my friend as well. Thank you very much. And you've chaired this really well. And I think officers can say as well that you are very on the level and have worked well with you all. There you go.
Thank you very much. And so, yeah, you'll be sorely missed by this council, Claire. You really will be. Councillor Love, and then we'll move on. Carl, the last word with you, sir.
And thank you, Chair. And again, thank you. We all understand how difficult this is for everybody, for councillors, for officers, for the parents, families and children. So I just wanted to just make sure that a couple of points were just because some very good points that you made, Councillor Andre. But when schools are named, we're not talking about it's a done deal, because there's a process. Remember, the process doesn't conclude until the schools are formally at this meeting decided to be closed. And I just wanted, because it just sounded it sounded a little bit from all of us that we were saying when they're named we have to follow through with the process. No, follow through with the closure. We're following through with the process that might still have opportunity for that school to be considered for an alternative solution. So that's the first thing. We recognise how difficult it is for all of the schools and all of the people involved in this. But I think what we need to say is I'm recognising that everything is fine until the point of you naming my school or my children's school. That, we accept, we're saying to parents, we accept the emotions of it. We expect there to be some pros and cons and good debates around why that school should or should not be closed, and we expect that, and so we're not so, but we also need to recognise that we need to do that in a fair and an appropriate way. And those were the points that I needed to make, because there is no done deal. No matter what when the schools are named, there'll be a process which needs to go through, and we councillors will be fair in that, as will officers. I think you made a really good point about, and this is one of the discussions that we had, Chris, before you came into this particular group. We had this discussion just a few weeks ago about how do we close schools and when, because there is no easy solution no matter what, because people are going to say that school, this school, this school, that school. And so that needs to be hammered out yet, and we wait for the officers to come back. And I do say that this is a joint effort between us all. It's fair and right and proper for us councillors to say to schools, well, if there are going to be 6 schools closed, how and which ones, and do we announce it or not? And that is a really difficult thing for all the reasons that we've said, because it is possible that some parents might move their child to a school that is then closed in the future, and that's distressing and upsetting. So we need to find ways of doing that in an appropriate way that we can manage. It is the reality. What I'm hoping is that we're not going to close 2 schools in Ryde, for instance. We might close one in Ryde, and I'm not presuming anything, and then another one up in Freshwater. There's only one in Freshwater. I'm not suggesting we do. I'm just trying to say that they're not going to be, hopefully, side by side. So the children that move from this school to their next nearest school, perhaps that might or might not be on the list. We don't know. It's about how. So it's not going to be a simple solution, is it? But I just think that that's important to understand. I mean, I don't know how many schools, we have not, as a council, agreed how many schools, 6, 9, 10, 20, whatever, we've, none of that has been discussed. So it's a slow evolving process and it's emotive for us all. I've said all that I want to say.
At the moment, this is about process to be followed.
That's the
We
important
started the
thing.
ball rolling. I'd like just to invite Ashley and Beth just to sum up, then we'll go back to Councillor Andre about, because, this is about giving officers between now and the first meeting of this committee in June or July, a steer on what we would like them to do. So sum up and what the next steps are in your process, and then we'll move to the possible recommendation amendments.
So if the recommendations are supported, then what I will be doing is reaching out to all stakeholders again and engaging them in a formal process which will run from now until next committee to collect their views on the specifics of what can be presented to committee in June, late June or early July, which is when we expect the next committee to be. We'll be taking into account things like the fact that a number of groups raised a request for independent oversight of the process, some kind of external scrutiny of the process. And so we would be looking to implement that, but also we need their input into developing the next stage of the detail of it. So, for example, the consideration of things like what Councillor Jarman has just said. And then after the elections, what we'll be doing is working with the new committee to have some meetings outside the public space in terms of just making sure that councillors understand the complexity of it if they're new to the situation. Some of you may be back for more, some people may be new, but there's a lot of work to do to make sure that for people who are new, that they understand the complexity of this, so that when they do make decisions, that they're making informed decisions about it. So that's how I see the next few months playing out if these recommendations are supported.
Beth, anything you want to add? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Andre, you know, the recommendations
Thank you,
that
Chair.
we fed into you, what were you suggesting?
Just a slight amendment to 3D to insert the word continues. So it reads, delegates authority to the Strategic Director of Children's Services to continue working with stakeholders. Because that, I think it's important that we recognise the work that has gone on to date.
More than happy to accept that amendment. So, officers have, okay, so if I just read what the recommendations will now read. So recommendations are that the committee, A, agrees that reducing the number of school places on the island, which may mean school closure, is a critical and urgent priority. B, recommends that following the council election on the 7th of May, the council's new administration retain this as a corporate priority and recognise the urgency of addressing the issue. C, agrees that the first meeting of this committee under the new administration should consider recommendations on how to realise this reduction in school places. And D, as amended, delegates authority to the Strategic Director of Children's Services to continue working with stakeholders between now and that committee, expected to be in June/July, on the specifics of these recommendations. So I will propose that from the chair. Councillor Andre will second that. All those in favour? Thank you. And thanks for all the work that's gone into this so far. Those recommendations unanimously passed. So we'll move on to paper 8F. Carly, I apologise it's the last paper, but I do take them in the order they come onto the work plan. So thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to read this report. The report sets out the proposed next steps in terms of our island's early intervention and prevention service. So that, by and large, is essentially our family hub and family centre offer. For me, I think it's a really good example, and I put this in the report, of a One Council initiative. So this work has been ongoing since 2015. And we have aligned our work with public health, and we have a range of organisations and a range of services feeding into the Family Hub offer. And some of you may know that as a local authority, we are one of 13 nationally that trailblaze the Family Hub programme. So we were part of the development of this whole model, and we have supported a range of local authorities to implement their Family Hub offer as well. So we're incredibly proud and passionate of the work that we do. The current contract, which is fulfilled by Barnardo's as a national children's charity, ends in March 2027. So we cannot extend that any further. Therefore, so a new procurement process is essential in order to continue this offer. So the report outlines all of the information with regards to the tendering process and the recommendations. So in terms of the current offer, we have 3 Isle of Wight family hubs, and they're situated in Newport, Sandown and Ryde. And those 3 hubs are hubs by definition because they are open Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, with evenings and with some evenings, weekends and school holidays. And then in addition to that, we have 5 children's centres that are part of the offer, and they are more by appointment only, and they're in Carisbrooke, Ventnor, Freshwater, East Cowes and Cowes. In addition to that, we also have the Shanklin Creative and Youth Hub. So that is run by our voluntary sector colleagues, Aspire, and that is also part of the Family Hub offer. I have included in here, as you will see, some of the impact of the last financial year of our current providers, and I wanted to just hone in on some of these points really. I think the value of this offer and the work that we do is it really is cross-sector partnership working, and we have so many of our voluntary sector organisations that feed into this offer, and we're continuing to build this. So more than 3,200 sessions were delivered by the current provider and also our partner agencies through this offer. And I think what's really important to mention is this is a hybrid offer. So this may be in person, this may be a virtual offer as well, and this is around going into the homes for those families who can't access the hubs and centres. So we do have an intensive outreach service as part of that. The programme of the Start for Life and Family Hubs had a real focus on, as Ashley mentioned earlier, preconception up to the age of 2. So what you might know is 1,001 critical days. And there was a real focus in the first few years of this programme to focus on that, those preconception, so expectant families, and working until a child turns 2. But as we move through this programme, we're now looking at school readiness. So there is a real focus on how we support our children to be ready for their primary education, be that electively home educated or in our school system. But if we have a look at some of our Start for Life statistics on some of the focused work we've done, we have on average at the moment about 1,000 children born a year, and we had last year 938 expectant and new parents access our Start for Life offer. We had, in terms of school readiness, 307 early language interventions were delivered for children across the island. And one thing that I always raise, because I just think this is just fantastic really, in terms of our infant feeding. So when we started this programme, when health visitors were looking at mums who were breastfeeding at 6 to 8 weeks, we were way below the national average at 36%, and it's now at 56 and pushing towards 60%, which is above the national average of 52%. So we can see the work, the focus work that's going into these targeted areas and the impact that it's having. And I think as much as we stress that this is a really important One Council project, the way that we work with our voluntary and community sectors really is enhancing this offer. We can't do it on our own, and we are really driven to continue to extend that offer. And I think some of the work that they are doing, our voluntary sector within the hubs, is invaluable. And so we're really keen to continue to develop that. In terms of, I've provided obviously an overview of the financial budget. So the money is pooled between children's services and public health, but there is also an enhancement for the Start for Life and Family Hub programme. So we have funding for the next 3 years. So you can see through the financial overview what we will be securing through that programme. The risk, Councillor Love, I know you mentioned this a few times this evening, but I have produced a risk and mitigation table within this report to show that we have considered we have considered all those potential risks, and we review this through our governance regularly each month through our Family Hub board. So in terms of the recommendations, obviously, it's for us to continue looking to procure a new, or to continue the tendering exercise for a new provider for our family hubs for 2027 for 3 years, and then an opportunity to enhance for another 3 years, so potentially for the next 6 years, and that the committee delegates authority to the Director of Children's Services, the Director of Public Health, and the Section 151 officer. Thank you.
Charlie, thank you for your report. The encouraging thing for me is that we've still got 3 hubs, the 5 family centres, because I remember when I was cabinet member, Councillor Andre probably remembers the same. Every year when we did a budget style change, but you always cut. No, we can't cut one of them. We had 9 originally. I think we did have 9 at one point.
Yes, we do. We do technically still have the 9 because the Shanklin Centre runs as a youth and community hub, but we still use it as a family hub as well.
Every year I used to get, well, we can save money by cut. No, we're not cutting any of them. I saw as long as they had the same. So with that, we still got the 9 buildings, and that proves it was worth fighting against having the budget cuts. So, questions, Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Carly, you mentioned that you are proud. You should be. You should be incredibly proud. I was at Ryde Library, it was, when Andrea Leadsom came down, when she was actually chairing an all-party parliamentary working group on the 1001 Days. And she was absolutely blown away by the fact that the Isle of Wight were actually ahead of the curve, and the model that we actually had was the model that the government thought was this brand new spanking wonderful thing that they were bringing in. So it was really, really good to see that. And I think it's fair to say we've, as you've alluded to in the report, we've seen the family hubs go from strength to strength. And I think they are absolutely needed now, even more than they were when they were remodeled. I just have one just item for clarification. Under financial budget, item 14, you've put the financial envelope for this service is capped at £8,717,604. That's for the 6 years, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I've looked at the funding formula below. Just because when I first looked at it, I thought, if that's for 1 year.
No, that's
But
the,
that's
that's
for the
the
6
total
years.
financial envelope, yeah.
Okay, but thank you so much for the great work that is going on. Thank you.
Councillor Cole.
Just want to just clarify something. Well, it's actually in the document, but it says point 8, officers to award an early intervention and prevention contract. So I'm just asking, you're not proposing to bring back your proposed bidder for us to consider, no?
So at the moment, we're in the procurement process. So we've just gone out and had the feedback for the preliminary market questionnaire. So we only have a draft specification for the contract. So we have to consider obviously that engagement.
That's absolutely fine. I'm just saying, when you've got to the point of this is our preferred, are you bringing that back to us? Because it looks like you're going to make the decisions about employing. Is that, have I got that right or not? That, that you will award the contract? Or does it come back here to be awarded?
That's
You
what
know
I read
that,
it.
but I'm asking the
We're
question,
delegating
should that be right?
an officer decision at the end of the procurement process to sign off the contract. Yes, I mean, we wouldn't get involved in individual bids. We just get involved in what the bid looks like. We wouldn't get involved.
The reason I'm asking the question is they might come back with a provider who says that they want to charge £2 million for it. Okay, and we're responsible for budgets, etc. And I'm just trying to think about what the parameters around that, about officers making decisions on budget. I'm not trying to muddy the water, please don't think I am. I'm just trying, in the current climate of I personally would like you to say back, and there's this provider and this provider, you can choose between. I know that might be stretching it out a bit, but for me, this isn't an officer decision. This is a decision of the council to say, for you to present to us the people who you think should be and make a recommendation to that end. But I think it's I think it should be a council decision, particularly when there are potentially millions of pounds attached to it. That's all I'm asking. I'm asking that question. So I'm not trying to make it messy for you. If
Ashley, do
it's
you have any-
millions of pounds, I think we should.
Ashley, do you have any comments?
Thank you, councillor. Carly, is it worth just going through how it is funded in terms of the grant funding element of it, so that councillors understand how that is different to it being a general fund decision relating to the setting of the overall council budget?
Absolutely, yeah, no problem. So that's outlined in, I'm just shooting through to find it. Thank you, in the report. I think the other thing just to add as well, in terms of the tendering process, so obviously there's a really robust process around there, Councillor Love. So we will make sure that, and we've done this, obviously, this is our third time round with this particular contract, and we have developed it very confidently in terms of what we need to be provided to deliver. So we will use that tendering process robustly alongside our colleagues across the council to make sure that we score and we scrutinise those applications, however many come through, to make sure that the right one is potentially awarded. In terms of the funding, hopefully it's clear enough within the report. So essentially, we have a pooled, as I said earlier, pooled funding between public health and children's services. So that money has been pooled together since 2015, and that has remained. And we've got the financial commitment from both children's and public health finance colleagues to say that that money is available. And then what we do know is the confirmed funding for the next 3 years for the Start for Life and Family Hub programme. So that's grant funded, and that money must be, and has been for the last 3 years, must be invested in a family hub model. So we have to invest that money in that way into this contract, essentially, and how we deliver that offer.
Does that answer your question, councillor? Councillor Mosdale, yeah.
So I'm not going to vote for this. So as Adult Social Care Committee, everything that was a large amount of money, however the money came through, it was treated by that committee to make that final decision, and a report was brought, and it was the committee that decided it. I will not be voting for something that actually takes it away from the committee system and delegates that completely to an officer and the 151 officer. That is not going to be my legacy that I will be leaving here. If it was cabinet was existing, that decision would be taken by yourself, the Director of Public Health, and the cabinet member. This is a decision that is public money, and this is a committee system, and it needs to come through. It needs to go through the due process, a report at the end of it saying, this is who we recommend it. Even if it's a final nod to get it over the line, it has to come through to this committee. It is public money, and I will not be voting for that power to be taken away from this committee or from any future cabinet member. Because once you start that, it won't come back. You know, and I've been a cabinet member, and I've made some massive decisions on children's nurses contracts, sexual health contracts, but they all came to the cabinet member, and as chair of adult social care, they came to there as well. So I won't be voting for that. I'm sorry.
Can I just clarify? Because that is my concern.
Yeah.
Is that it's not, I'm not questioning you in any way about the process. I'm just saying that the decision, it seems to me that the council is not making a decision and the officers are, and it's a very large amount of money in a time of really difficult. And I'm not questioning the fact that you might be able to get it cheaper. Right? I'm not just saying, I think if we are the accountable body, I'm not going to take responsibility for a decision that a 151 officer makes about this on a pure financial basis. It's about, and that's what I'm questioning.
Can I just check, what is the timing? And I know the procurement process, we're in the procurement process now. How long is the procurement process?
So we'll have a final specification. I think it's signed up on the 23rd of March. The procurement timeline is part of the appendix as well, so you'll be able to have a look at that. Just get the.
The point is, obviously, if point 3 is a contentious one about delegating authority, are we able to make that decision as the first committee? Does that fit with the timeline of the existing contract, or are we bound to make that decision earlier?
Chair, paragraph 4 may be helpful.
Yeah. it's a specification to be confirmed, yeah, but then that will start that procurement process. But I'm thinking about the final decision on procurement, that's what, yeah. Can we, are we able to?
Essentially bring it back to.
Yeah,
committee.
yeah, not the process, start the process now,
The
do the
decision.
procurement. Are we allowed to bring back the decisions, what I'm getting at?
Mhm.
Of the actual, we're not gonna, the contract's not gonna suddenly disappear. It runs till March 2027, doesn't it?
It's only a couple of pages, but I
Yeah,
just
that's right.
think that if, I'll just talk about me, if I'm held accountable as a committee member, and somebody says, and you issued this contract, and say, well, actually I didn't, and then I look at you and I say, it's your, and in actual fact, it shouldn't be that you know what I mean? It shouldn't be it should be our responsibility. And that's what I'm saying is because, there are all sorts of things that could happen.
So
I'm
therefore
just saying
then,
it's our decision. Please bring it back for rectification.
when you get to
again.
recommendations, committee agrees the proposed service model and specification, family hubs and centres across the island. And the committee agrees to proceed to competitive procurement of the early intervention and prevention service. And this third recommendation, that the procurement decision is brought back to the meeting of this committee for agreement, approval. Does that doesn't cause any timescale issues for you,
So
any of you?
I'm just having a look. So the return of this tender submissions, so those that are bidding. So we have the bidders events for 8 weeks from the 14th of April. So that would be, the submissions would be by the 19th of May.
So the first meeting of this committee, if it was in June, could have that on the agenda to make that decision. Actually, does that fit with you? Okay. Right. So if we change the third recommendation, that the procurement approval is made by the first meeting of this Children's Services Skills and Education Committee. Yeah.
Chair, can I just clarify?
Yeah.
It's not the actual tendering process.
No.
It's the recommended, so
Yeah.
it's the recommended provider that is going to come back,
Yeah.
just to be clear.
You worded it in a better way than I have. I'll let Kat read out what the recommendations will now be then.
That's the third one.
Okay, the first recommendation, that the committee agrees the proposed service models and specification of family hubs and centres across the island. Second recommendation, that the committee agreed to proceed to competitive procurement of the early intervention and prevention service. And the third recommendation,
That the procurement decision comes before this committee for agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we'll put it on the work plan.
We'll put it on
Yeah,
work.
we'll put it on so, Kylie, that doesn't cause you a problem, does it?
No, that's okay.
Actually, it doesn't cause you a problem. So, councillor Love will propose those amendments. I'll second them. All those in favour of the paper? Thank you. Good points raised. Thank you. But a lift? You don't want to lift home then? Is my watch broken? It's only 8 o'clock. My husband's finished work. I'll ring you tomorrow. Thank you. Okay. Carly, thanks for the work on that one. Final item on the list is the work plan. Obviously, we've covered off everything that was required to be done at this meeting. But obviously, our role is to set the work plan for the committee going forward with officers. So we need to add on recommendation around the childcare sufficiency to. We wouldn't want it for the first meeting, would we? But what we used to, when 6 months' time to bring that back? This childcare sufficiency. Yeah. And then there's a meeting in August and a meeting in November. Bring it back to the November meeting, perhaps. Yeah. We need to add on the procurement of the prevention through partnership contract that we just mentioned. That needs to come back for the July to be confirmed for the July meeting. And we also need to put on to the next two agenda item, the next two meetings, school place plan. Be, yeah. Yeah. So the next one will, yeah, the next one will be update on further engagements. And then first one in the new academic year will be the decision one on effectively what we're going to do regarding schools. But we'll iron out by before then whether it's going to be phased schools or named schools or, yeah, we need the unions engagement. Ashley.
Just wondering on the dates there, that we've got August and November, whether it be prudent to have one in September, rather perhaps not have the August one. I guess this is be up to the new, but yeah.
Thank you very much.